Welcome into REEL Biz. I am your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today is the executive producer of Glory Girl Productions, Lisa Hall. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Well, I am so blessed to have you with me here today. We're going to be talking about a couple of your films today as we go through the episode. But before we get into that, I want to just give you a few moments here to give us a little bit of your backstory, and then we'll pick up the conversation from there.
Okay, and cut me off if I'm droning on and on. You just give me the fine. My name is Lisa Hall, and I'm coming to you today from beautiful Brown County, Indiana, which is in South Central Indiana. And my husband and I moved down here in 2017. Really feeling like there was a reason I was supposed to move here, but I didn't know what that was. We left Indianapolis, our home of 25 years. I started serving women in incarceration down here and just fell in love with them and their stories, and quickly realized that because of today's very highly addictive substances that had I tried those in a vulnerable moment and in my own life, I could be sitting where they were. And that just haunted me. And someone had said to me, "Are there stories to tell?" And I said, "I think we should tell stories until we can change the trajectory of pandemic drug use in this nation." And so I set out to make a documentary film called The Addict's Wake. And we finished that in October of 21, premiered at the Indiana Heartland International Film Festival, and did really well, and away we went.
Oh, and Lisa, as you well know from our discovery call, I was in their position.
Yeah.
So obviously a deep affinity for me for what you're doing, the work that you are doing, not just inside of the prison, but in bringing those stories now out and to the world, because I think it's something that because of the stigma of addiction and of prison and all of these things, that the stories of not just their addiction and the troubles, but how people recover and rise from those, I think are often undersold. It's a big reason why I'm not afraid to share my story personally,
Yes.
because I believe that we all have a shot at redemption. And it's not easy, especially with the addictive nature of the drugs that we have, the pharmaceutical industry creating even more than what is naturally occurring out there in the world. You know, your cocaine and heroin were bad enough. Now the pharmaceutical industries are taking these drugs and even maximizing their, not just potency, but the addictive nature of these substances. So it's incredible work that you are doing. I'm so grateful to you, not just for the work inside of the walls, but in bringing those stories outside of the walls and putting them out there. And no doubt the rest of the world feeling that with your success in the, independent film world and out there in some of these, places that you've been showing them.
Let's be clear. I knew nothing about making a film, but I've been a marketer of people, products, places, and things my whole life. And so I wasn't daunted by the task, because I felt that passion that you just spoke to about the need to equip communities with tools that fight back. And so for whatever reason, Bubba, these films are giving permission for people to talk about it in a way that they've never talked about it before. It's shedding light. And you and I both know when light gets shed on something that's been held in the dark, that's where we can start to heal. And as we showed that first film, I had to do a few festivals because I had no street cred as a filmmaker. This was my first attempt, and so I got my laurels that I needed. But the real heart of this was to get inside of communities and again start those conversations so we could start the healing. And as we were in those communities, it was fascinating. We had 2 outcries for 2 additional films. One was an educational film for students who, we in this nation, we are spending so much time on recovery infrastructure, which is awesome. It's needed, it's necessary. but we don't have that same allocation of resources for prevention. And so I knew if we did an educational film that I really wanted it to be preventative and to really show kids not a unicorn story of just say no, but the reality of what happens when you start using even at earlier ages. So Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield came together with me to help me produce that educational film that's available for 6th grade on up. I have many adult groups who are using that film, and it's just been fun to see, again, just the impact that can have. And then the third film that we premiered with in January 25 was for law enforcement and first responders. And I don't think people have any idea of what substance use and declining mental health looks like from their lens. What do they go through as agencies as they incarcerate folks who are really struggling? You know, we have one sheriff say we can't arrest the addiction out of people. So we need to do something different when they're in our care in incarceration. And so we showcase 3 different agencies who are really bringing in innovative programming, such as faith-based programming, peer coaching, peer navigating, regular counseling and meetings, and they're allowing these new things inside of incarceration. MAT, which is medical assisted treatment, which is somewhat controversial, but I've learned that it shouldn't be, because if it's helping people to sustain, and sustainability is our goal, right? So when they come out, they're that much stronger to be reintegrated into society. And so these agencies are doing different things, and we showcase that, and we showcase how it's working. It's reducing recidivism. And, you know, we have Nate in there who had overdosed twice in 24 hours, and he was really kind of done. And a sheriff just spoke into his life, or it was a narcotics officer spoke into Nate's life in a way that no one had done before, and really challenged him to live. And, you know, Nate's story is really incredible and very inspiring. And now Nate turns his pain into purpose. And isn't that why we're all here? You know, to turn around and take what we learn to help somebody else. And so I have those 3 films. And then because my educational film was for 6th grade on up, I wanted to have something for our littles. I probably had 100 hours of footage when we filmed the original feature length. And I kept seeing all these little people that were in circumstances inside their home that were really challenging. So I wrote Avi's Hope, and Avi is an 8 or 9-year-old little girl navigating active addiction in the home with mom. But we wanted Avi to have 3 really strong goals, and one was healthy coping techniques and mechanisms. And she goes to her imaginary horses in her head, Prince and Rizzo, when she's feeling such dread. And then we wanted her to have trusted adults to talk to, and she has her Nana and her teacher to tell when she's not feeling well. And then third and foremost, Bubba, this was so important to me, we wanted Avi to know, when I say we, that's me, myself, and I just try to make my team sound bigger. It's really just me. And so I wanted Avi to know that even at 8 or 9, she could use her voice to change her life or something different. And we have to empower our kids to understand that they can be the chain breakers of generational use. In the state of Indiana, generational use is very pervasive, and I'm finding that that's the case really throughout the nation. We're not unusual. And so that's kind of my documentary series, if you will, the tools that I have available for communities. And you license them once through me, and then you have them for as long as you want to use them.
I think you touched on something with the agencies specifically that we did not see 30, 40 years ago. That addicts were treated as criminals only, that they were diametrically opposed to the law and the law officers, and that the law officers often looked at the addicts as just criminals and didn't see them necessarily as people that were struggling. I think a lot of that has changed. And when you think about it, these officers of the law that are coming into contact with these addicts probably on a pretty regular basis, right, over the course of, years of active addiction, that they are really the only positive source or a role model in that person's life. So the more that these people can be trained on seeing the people they're dealing with in a different light and understanding their role in their life, not just as the keeper of the law and of the peace there, but as someone who can have a positive impact on the lives of the addicts, someone who they can trust in those moments, right? And I think that not all addicts are criminals, right? I think a lot of criminals and people who are bent on just committing crimes and of being of that are addicts also, but that not all drug addicts are criminals and want to live that life. They are caught in something completely different. And I think that our systems are set up and are changing for the better in that regard, to understand that good people can become addicts and become part of a criminal element. And because addiction can lead to so many things, right? A loss of your job, which leads you to maybe becoming a thief or committing crimes that you wouldn't normally do if you were not faced with active addiction. And someone who's been inside of that in so many ways and has seen so many stories from the inside, I've seen what a positive impact a truly a voice can be, to look at someone and to tell them that they can be someone else. You can live a different life, and your life doesn't have to be that way, because when you're inside of an active addiction and surrounded by criminal elements, nobody's going to tell you that it can be different than it is right now.
Well, first off, no one sets out to become an addict. When someone tries drugs, they're usually numbing some emotional pain. We say pain is the gateway drug, and there's something that's not right in their spirit or soul, and so drugs brings that temporary comfort. But as you and I talked about early on, with today's drugs and the properties of today's drugs, it doesn't take long to get that hook set. And so, I don't think for anyone I've ever interviewed, they said, geez, I hoped I could grow up and be an addict. That wasn't anything anybody ever said. And so, that breeding of compassion is so important for all of us. And that is a mind shift and a change that is happening with our law enforcement, our first responders. And you're right, I don't even think it's been 30 or 40 years. I think that's been new probably in the last 10 years. And so, we still have some grumpy sheriffs and grumpy law enforcement officers who are, that we have to still work on changing their mindset. But that is the first stop in somebody's recovery journey. Why wouldn't we want to do everything that we could to stabilize them and to help sustain them while they're in a safe place to get healthy and detox and to start their recovery? So all these films, I had four goals, and I maintained them through each iteration that I created. And one was just broadening the awareness. We hear about the opioid crisis in the news, but until it hits our home or our family or a loved one or a best friend or a coworker, we don't really understand it, right? And so that awareness net needed to be casted farther and wider when I started. And then we need to humanize this issue, to your point. I mean, these are people with potential. And we want to breed compassion as we look at their lives. The reality is, Bubba, we're all addicted to something. I laugh, and my husband says to me, I think you're addicted to Amazon. Amazon boxes showing up, but it's overeating, or it's sugar, or it's caffeine, or it's nicotine, or it's pornography, or whatever. Many people struggle with some sort of an addictive behavior. And so, that compassion is so critical. And then what I saw when I got started in the recovery world was how siloed recovery is. And, what I wanted these films to do was to really serve as a clarion call for communities to link arms, share resources, know what the right hand needed to know what the left hand's doing. Bring everybody around the table, give them a seat, and let's talk about, as a community, how we can link arms and fight back. Coalitions have since been formed. That is happening, and that is really exciting to see, because this silo, this is our recovery effort, this is our budget, this is our grant, and no, we're not going to open our arms because we're afraid of losing funding or whatever the case may be. And that mind shift needed to change, and that's changing. So that's exciting too. But the very last thing, and again, probably the most important to me, was to showcase hope in all these films, because recovery does happen. We hear about the ones who don't make it because that makes more dramatic headlines, but many people do recover. They're recovering in incredible and remarkable ways, and then they're going on to use their life to serve others, who were just like them, 3 years ago. And so we really wanted to showcase hope, and that we can't lose hope. Without hope, we have nothing. And so for this issue, I really wanted to show those stories where people have made it, and they're doing great work, and they're leading healthy lives and good families, and maintaining jobs, and so that does happen, and it was important for me to showcase that, just like you.
Exactly, Lisa. That's exactly what I was going to say, is that it's why I'm so passionate about sharing my story. It would be very easy for me to cordon off that part of my life and my prison time, and to not share that with anyone, and to just let them see the person that I am now, and this positive impact that we are. But I had to learn and to go through a lot to be able to do that, and to not share that darkness would be completely inauthentic of myself. And I think that's why we attract the viewership that we do, and we build the community that we do. And I think it's beautiful what you're sharing, of not just sharing the story, and we talk about it a lot in treatment, of glorifying our drug use, right? We're not necessarily sharing those stories to glorify them, but to put a microscope on what we did. Hey, I did that. And I don't want to do that anymore. And to bring these stories out, and I'm always supporting people who are being true to themselves and sharing their story and being a light out there in the world. I think it's important. Do you see it on your end that, the women that you worked with inside of the prison, that you shared and brought their story out there, or the jail? I'm not sure what, facility you were in, but do you feel like there was some effect that it had on them being part of this movie, and really inspired them to be better, and to not go back to facing their addictions and kind of falling back into that path, that it gave them some accountability now because they've been featured in the film?
I'm so glad you asked that. And many of them weren't featured in the film, but they knew I was involved in telling these stories. And so when I had my trailer ready in December of 19, I remember going in on a Sunday, and this is one of those moments that I will just absolutely treasure with me to my grave. And you're not supposed to take your phone in, right? And so I snuck it in, and I told this in front of my sheriff not too long ago. And I had my back to the wall because all the ladies knew that I was working on this film. And I said, okay, line up over here, and we're going to watch the trailer. And Bubba, they were so excited. I've never had that kind of excitement shown to me about my work, and they couldn't wait to see it. And so it's about a 3-minute or so trailer, and about halfway through, this joy turned to, their countenances just changed into crying and tears. And I'm like, oh gosh. I go, girls, we're gonna get in trouble, because the camera's back here. The camera can't see I have my phone, but the camera can see all of a sudden they've gone from great joy to complete sorrow. And so after it was over, I'm passing out Kleenex, and I'm like, let's get back to our seats. And I said, okay, y'all, you need to tell me, what was that about? And and they spoke up, and they said this in different ways, but it was the same meeting. That was the first time they had seen what their decision to use had done to others. And so I was like, okay, we're on to something. And it wasn't done in a shameful way. It wasn't casting shame on them. They just were able to deduce from the parents we had interviewed, and the community members. They saw what that wake was for various people. And I thought, okay, good, 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 good. Because again, the idea was not to create even more stigma and shame. It was to break down that wall. And so they loved it. I mean, they loved it. Despite the tears, they loved it. But I'll never forget that, because I thought, okay, we're going about this in the right way. And their tears weren't tears, again, of shame. They were tears of that accountability you're talking about. And I think until you realize you have accountability to a certain degree, to change, to make a new decision, or to do something different, change your people, places, and things. That was really resonating with them as they saw that trailer. That's just one moment that I will never forget in the creation of this content.
Well, and it brings up an interesting point of someone being able to, produce things on a much smaller budget in a much smaller way. What kind of struck me there was that they were getting the effect of what I think, people on the outside and around addicts are looking to get from an intervention. The problem with an intervention is that once you walk into that room and all these people are sitting there facing you, you put up a wall that's 100 feet tall and your guard is up. And what the barrier of the video production has done now is allowed the children or the parents or anyone in that wake, these loved ones, to share their story with catching the addict with their guard down. And I think that's an extremely powerful thing that you've touched on here, that maybe becomes a part in the future of drug addiction and treatment and those things, of having these things shared in a different way, especially now that the technology is so readily available. Everyone has access to a professional video production on their phones now. And I think that's extremely powerful, what you've showcased in that moment, and risking your own freedom to bring that out. And we may never known what that effect was, but you got a case study in real time with a 3-minute trailer of the impact that this video can not only have on the addict themselves, but on their loved ones, being able to share that part of their journey as well.
You are so insightful, Bubba. You have a real gift of intuition, because that's just a really thoughtful, insightful realization that you just verbalized. And nobody's verbalized it like that, but that is exactly what happened. And when I started, I didn't want to create a film that just focused on the addict. There were 1,000 of those films out there, right? I wanted to show the impact of this issue on a community. In the new film that I'm working on, it is said that when someone takes their life, 139 people are affected. I happen to believe that number's conservative, but that's a minimum. Let's say that's a minimum of people who are affected when someone takes their own life, whether that's overdose or suicide or whatever the case. And so that's what I wanted to have happen with the Addicts Wake. I wanted people to understand the wake effect. And it's not, the wake isn't about death, and many people go into it thinking that's what they're going to hear about. But it's about the wake of positivity, the wake of change, the wake of, we need to awaken. We need to, what one person can speak to an individual's lives to change everything. And that's what happened to Nate inside of incarceration. And so you're very right. And that was just such a precious moment to me. And sometimes I can't tell that story without tears, because they just really touched me. And 2 of those ladies that were in that room are no longer with us. I lost them eventually. And so this project has not come without cost. And I think when you put yourself out there to deal with these very heavy issues, you have to be prepared to, have your own loss along the way. And there are days when I wasn't prepared for that.
Lisa, I really appreciate all the work that you have done so far, the work that you continue to do. Where can people find you? Where can they get in touch with you to share their stories or to license the films to show in their communities? How can they get in touch with you and get that process going so that they can change the lives of the people around them as well?
That's awesome. Yeah, and may I mention just real quickly before I tell you that you can go to pbs.org right now through August of 26. You can watch that original film. It's a 58-minute abridged version of that feature length, but it is the film I started with, and it has been on a national PBS broadcast for 3 years. It'll end in August. Like August 17th of this year. So go check that out. You can stream it for free while you can still do that. And then the other films, if you're interested in, you can go to theaddictswake.com, and I think you're showing that across the screen. And my contact information is on that website, but you can also watch all 4 trailers. You can read a little bit more about Avi's Hope. And yeah, that's the place to get the best information. And then my email is lhall@glorygirlproduction.com. I'm sorry, Bubba. I know you didn't want me to share that. I'm just so used to sharing it. I apologize. Shoot. And so anyway, but theaddictswake.com, find me at Lisa Hall, LinkedIn. It's kind of a brand new account. I had to start over. But then my new film is Dying for Freedom, and we're going to be telling the veteran story of declining mental health and suicide when they are coming back out of service. And we're losing too many veterans, just like we are those to overdose. So yeah, that's coming, and people can go watch the trailer on dyingforfreedom.org.
Well, and we're going to be getting together with Operation Combating Veteran Suicide and dyingforfreedom.org with you, Lisa, and finding ways that we can bring this film to even more people and to set up a lot of great activations to bring awareness to the issue.
Yes.
And I'm just so appreciative of getting to spend some time with you today, and very appreciative for the work that you're continuing to do in these spaces that are very near and dear to my heart. Lisa Hall, thank you so much for taking some time for me today, and thank you for being part of the scene.
Thank you, Bubba. And I appreciate the opportunity to collaborate. You're doing amazing, hard things too. And I too am grateful for the work you're doing. So thank you so, so much.